so that you can come in.
No, this isn't too bad, but
Yeah, Kevin said I should.
I mean, if they're...
I was like, she's not going to see it. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know someone's playing it up. Someone's really close to reading.
meetings, and I was like,
Definitely live. Okay, so we're on. Welcome everyone to this evening's workshop. Grading and reporting, if I got that right. I seem to remember reading something that on the agenda this evening.
We are on, yeah.
There we go. Now we're actually on. Maybe that's just whether we're on TV or not. So welcome everyone, and Katie, get us underway.
Okay. So just a reminder to everyone that last year was a big year, that we made a shift to do the proficiency-based grading grades 7 through 12. And by probably November, December, we knew we had probably work to do. And then parents came forward in March wanting us to really examine what was going on with our grading. And a task force met, and you have several members of the task force here for presenting. And they have been implementing the new grading guidelines at grades 7 through 12. So you're going to be hearing from teachers from the middle school and high school about the change, what's going on, how they're implementing, and you can ask questions. We also will be talking elementary, obviously is not using the Empower for reporting right now, but they are using it as an assessment system where they're gathering data on students around the targets. So Stephanie Maris and Colleen Henry from Fairview are going to explain how that's being used at the elementary level. Sue Callahan and Diana Carson will be updating around the middle school, and Evan Sear and Nate Terriot from the high school will be updating from the high school point of view. So it's really them sharing information around what's really going on at the school level, and for you to ask questions and for them to give you information. So, yeah.
Good. I would ask the committee members if they have specific questions, concerns, or something that they would like an answer to, or would like something out before they start explaining, so they perhaps could hit that in their explanation. It would be good to air that right now, and then they can adjust their presentations appropriately. Pat, do you have?
I think there's some confusion in the community about the 50 to 100 as opposed to the 0 to 100. So if you could speak to that and how it's working, and maybe a little bit about the rationale behind that, it might be helpful.
Okay, great.
Good. Alfreda, did you have a comment?
Yes, I had two. One has to do with the 50 to 100, because there was some confusion in the parts of parents who are hearing from their kids that, you know, if they have some leeway because of the 50 to 100. So what's happening there is students are probably be given an opportunity to wait a little bit when they shouldn't be. So that's what I have heard from some parents who have told me, that their children are being told, you know, this allows you to catch up when you need to, and then you can jump on from 50 to 100 and get your grade. So the worry is that, do we have more wiggle room than we're supposed to have, you know, that kind of thing. The other thing is having to do with, no, that's another, I'll hold that for another time. So, and you're all from middle school, correct? No. Is there elementary? The other thing is, thank you, elementary. I know that elementary is using Empower, and you know, middle school, high school are using Power School. I would like to have some conversations with you about, is Empower working for our elementary kids? Truly, is it not? You know, because we are using two venues here for assessment and for record keeping. So those two questions.
Okay.
Faith, nothing? Dan? Nope. We're good to, Bonnie, we're good to go? All right.
Okay. So we'll kick it off with elementary. So Stephanie and Colleen, why don't you explain how it's being used, who sees it, what teachers are expected to do, and then Colleen, you can also share what you've been doing. They're a little nervous, you know, it's hard to come to a public
Very
meeting.
gracious to come and join us this evening, so thanks to her for being here tonight. Absolutely. In the elementary level, our teachers are using Empower to access their curriculum. Our ELA and math committees have developed the scope for our teachers so that they know what targets they're teaching and at what grade level that is being taught at, and also the proficiency level that students are expected to achieve at each grade level. So it kind of gives us that span, and we're looking at where there are gaps in instruction to keep continuing planting that seed of knowledge. As a classroom teacher, I remember introducing something to my 6th graders and them saying, well, we've never heard about that before. Well, yes, but maybe not since 2nd grade, and reintroducing, so it's more purposeful instruction that way. So teachers can access their curriculum, and we're also asking them to score each of those targets at assessment times or in ongoing times when we see proficiency scores there. So teachers have designed grade books based on their units, or they might be looking at the targets as a whole. And by the end of each instructional year, especially with our teachers at Fairview, we've had them enter a score, and they're able to go in and enter comments. So this year we have the benefit of last year's data. When we're sitting in our PLC groups, we're extracting the data from Empower to see what students scored on each target previously, and we can see those comments. I was working with a 5th grade group of teachers today in PLC, and we were talking about the next unit they're coming to, and they could specifically see which students struggled with multiplying 2-digit numbers by 1-digit numbers. This student struggled with carrying, so they know exactly what to go back in and support that student with, instead of just seeing that they were a 3 in math in the 4th grade and not really knowing what that means. It gives us very purposeful information. Right now, only teachers are seeing that information. We're not running our reports through Empower. And we don't have students accessing Empower at this point. It's just for administration and teachers, the way we're using it now.
So as a classroom teacher, everything Mrs. Mara said is how I enter my scores, but I also share scores with my students so that they're aware of how they're doing on their targets. They have portfolios where they track their progress as well, and it matches how I'm tracking their progress through Empower so that they can see how they're doing, where they need to go, how they are in a target, what they need to do next by looking at the scale, what skills they have under their belt, and what their next steps would be to move forward. And that helps me design my lessons to meet all my students where they are by seeing how they came into me from 1st grade, as Mrs. Mara said, and then ongoing throughout my year. I can make my groups that way and be more customizing.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
You may.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. My question would pertain to specifically, is the Empower more labor-intensive for the teachers than it would be with Power School?
Our teachers have never used Power School for grading,
right.
So this is all they know.
Right.
And we've put a lot of, last year when we started asking them to do this, Celeste Bodette, the Fairview principal, and I met one-on-one with each of our teachers to be able to kind of customize our work with them around who was comfortable with Empower, and we kind of scaffolded what we were asking them to do. They've never had a grading system before this, so they feel like now they have information, they're able to use it, and we're using it purposefully. So instead of just saying enter your scores and leave it, we're going back to that in our PLCs. We're revisiting that information. It's something they can reflect upon, and it's not just a score here. We've used the features that show scoring history so that last year even they could enter a score at the end of one unit, but maybe a few months later they might see that progress, and you're able to track that for a student. Now the next year's teachers have that benefit of more extensive data, so they're able to really see that progression for our struggling students and for our stronger students. So with that same PLC group I was talking about earlier today, we were looking at some kids that are coming in already with that score 3 proficiency. So talking about not moving them faster through their targets, but going deeper and stretching for those 4s and those 3.5s and really extending their knowledge and problem solving and things like that. So just deeper conversations about the information we have instead of just teaching Unit 2.
Thank you so much.
Or instead of just saying, okay, you've mastered this, let's go to 4. So what you really want to say is, what does 3 entail, and what have you learned out of it, and where can we go from there?
Right.
On 3. and then you're assessing them to go to 4 eventually.
Yes.
Tell us what PLC means.
I'm sorry to use an acronym
That's
without
all
an
right.
explanation. PLC is a professional learning community. So it's an opportunity for our teachers to have time together around focused conversation, data-driven about what we're doing with our students. When we, Celeste and I each meet with a different grade level, we have scheduled PLC time throughout the week. So we're meeting face-to-face with our teachers. We're looking at our data. We're setting SMART goals. We're progress monitoring. We're digging deeper and talking about our kids and doing that work.
So I have 2 questions. One, last year we heard about data walls, and I haven't heard any conversation about a data wall yet. And there must be a relationship between a data wall, if that can be explained slightly, and Empower, where this data resides. And I don't know which way data moves to create data walls. So perhaps a little explanation of that?
Sure. So we use data in different ways. In Empower, as an administrator, we built a grade book for all of those targets for each of our grade levels. So Celeste and I can go in and see where our kids are in progress on all of these targets at any given point in time. That's one way for us to look at our data. The other data wall that we maintain, that's my homework assignment for tonight, is to finish ours for Fairview, is taking all of that universal screening data from STAR and our running record data at the elementary level, and we put that into Excel spreadsheets that feed into a sheet that's like our data wall for the school. So we're tracking proficiency on those universal screeners that act as predictors for our state assessments.
Okay. See that relationship now. I was envisioning you had a wall. No, sorry.
I think before we had the benefit of technology, for sure there were a lot of Post-it notes on chart paper.
A lot of Post-it notes.
There was.
The other thing to the teacher in the classroom, I think that the community, at least we have heard, that adapting to some of the new strategies, teaching pedagogy and things, is creating a burden or overburdening teachers, and Empower and the reporting may be overburdening teachers. I guess a response from the teachers, which are here, addressing that for the community might be illuminating.
I find Empower to be very helpful because it tells me specifically what I need to do to help each of my students. If I didn't have that,
Rob, your mic, yeah, pull your mic.
if I didn't have that, it seems more vague and overwhelming, but by looking at concrete information from the scales and Empower, I can clearly see which children are working at the same level, which children should be working together, what I need to do with those specific children to move them to the next level. And when I first started teaching, I didn't have that, and it was more, what do I think I should do next? And I'm not sure what I should do next, but it's pretty clear. And it really isn't that time consuming to do. It's no different than how you would keep track of your grades on paper, but this is more purposeful.
Colleen, describe what you do at your PLC, your professional learning.
So we
who's meeting, and what do you do?
We meet as a grade level, and Mrs. Bodette is in our meetings for second grade. We set SMART goals as a grade level based on the needs of our students in literacy. Right now we're doing a literacy one. We report out what we're doing with our students. We talk about the data that we have to support setting the goal, share strategies and ideas. Sometimes we regroup our students flexibly within our classrooms. And when we feel we've met our goal, we set a new goal in math or something else.
So I just want to add something to Alfreda's question from before, when you were asking about their experience with Power School over something else. Because they haven't had a data system to enter or track anything in it, was just, as Colleen mentioned, those paper grade books. And then they had to go and give one overall, they had to go into and enter one overall score in each of the standards referenced pieces that are in the report card for elementary students as it stands now. And so our teachers still have to do that at this point, because that's what we, right now, are still using that report card framework.
Right.
So they are entering their data just as they would into a grade book, or teachers that used a spreadsheet or something like that, and then they just enter that score to represent those standard reference statements.
Okay, thank you very much.
And you may have already said this, but how often does the PLC meet? Because I'm sure that you get a lot of valuable information from that.
We meet once a week, and it's during one of our specialist periods. It's a set schedule, so ours is every Thursday. But.
Great.
40 minutes.
That's a good chunk of time. That's really good.
Any further questions? We appreciate all the work that's being done for our students.
Thank you.
Glad to hear that we're making progress.
So building on elementary to middle.
Elfrida?
I don't have a question, but it's, well, yeah, probably it is a question. We're sitting here looking at analyzing, you know, what our curriculum is like and how it's being delivered, and things, you know, are always a moving target in education today. And if I would like to hear from each one of you in terms of if there were one thing that you wish we would be able to do that you could see that would make a difference, because I'm concerned about the disconnect between our end of year assessments to what we're doing right now. You're working hard. I know you're working very hard. What is the disconnect? What would make a difference to push us into a percentile that would be beyond 60-something percentile? And I could probably start at this end, perhaps.
Are you
each one.
talking MEAs?
The MEAs. There is a disconnect, and we know that.
Well, I mean, I have an idea. Right now, we're grouping our kids by age, not by what they're ready for. So we're taking everybody who's 5 and sticking them in one classroom and expecting everyone to do grade 5 work. I mean, age 5 work when some kids aren't ready for that. And they need more time to develop. And I see it in my 7th graders. I've got about a third of them right now reading at a 3rd grade level. They need more time, but they're stuck to 175 days, and they don't have any extra time in the summer. We're not running extra hours for them or providing them any extra instruction and expecting them to catch up. So I think we need to stop grouping kids by age, break down those walls, and meet kids where they are and take them from there. Otherwise, you're not going to see any growth in tests. I mean, we're working very, very hard here.
No question.
Yeah, but it's hard to take someone who's reading at the 3rd grade level and bring them up 4 grade levels in a year and have them take a standardized test.
I can relate with that. I taught special ed for 17 years and then became an administrator.
They just need more
after.
time, and I wish we could give them more time.
And how we can do that in terms of assessing the kids. Is there something we can do when we assess them so that it kind of, brings that back into their grade level of assessment?
I don't think we're going to see a huge growth in the state assessments, because I think the state assessments aren't really aligned with what kids are doing. They keep changing. I mean, we can study what the past year's tests were, and we can look at previous years, but every year they have a different, it seems the state has a different goal. And I think where they keep moving or making, let's say they're making the football field longer, that goalpost keeps moving. So we're never going to make that goalpost that we want to do. We may make some growth in one area, but all of a sudden they're measuring something else. And you only have so many questions on a test to ask a child. Sometimes I feel with the reading and the math, it's hit or miss. And if we gave kids more opportunities to work at their level rather than their grade level, then I think you may, as Diana is suggesting, may see more movement in that. We need to have more summer school, but it needs not to be
definitely.
a punishment for kids.
No.
There needs to be there's this negative stigma when you ask kids to come for extra time. There are plenty of teachers willing to do it. I've done summer school in the past, and it's been some of the most rewarding, work that I've done here in Auburn. And my kids really made gains, but also it's given me the opportunity to work with kids in a smaller setting.
Right.
I mean, we've got over 20 kids in a classroom. It's really hard to, and it is, we do
That's more
our
than
best
enough.
to individualize, but it's very hard to individualize for every student when you have large class sizes.
And they need to work at their instructional level, not at their frustrational level.
Right.
And I understand that.
Right. So I just want to bring it back to grading for a second.
Please.
I was on as you know, I was on the task force with you and Bonnie and Patricia. And one of the things is I made clear at the task force is that middle school is very different from high school. We are not high school and we're not elementary school. We have to take our little kids, and we now have something called a teenager who's learning to be a teenager and doesn't know what they want to be, how they want to be, and how they want to interact with people. And probably grades are not their focus. Their focus is their social life, and so it's our job to get them to focus on what they don't want to. That's the best way I can.
God bless you for that, too.
So I've been at middle school for 20 years, and every year that's different for every kid. So when we met this summer, it was Diana and I and some other teachers, and when we looked at this, we didn't want to, the proficiency grading, that can't totally go away because it really helps us have an aligned curriculum, because we live in teams at middle school, and it's very hard for us to communicate with other teams during the school day. We communicate well within our own teams, but we'd like to have some common experiences for all kids. So we haven't totally thrown out Empower. I want you guys to know that the middle school's teachers are still using Empower. We go in there to look at the standards that are assigned to our grade levels, and for some kids who are working below grade level, we need to be able to see where they were in elementary school. So we're now getting that data with the Empower up to us, and that's been very beneficial. Where Empower was hard for us was the reporting piece. We are familiar and very comfortable with Power School, but the way that the kids saw Empower was clunky at best for them, and it was hard for a kid. We put it in place to be more transparent, and the Empower reporting system wasn't as transparent as we'd like it to be. I'm seeing a definite difference with Power School. I have a lot less kids owing work. Yes, I do have 8th graders this year, so I've had a year with my kids. I also loop with my kids. I think that's a big thing that we do.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah, and because I don't have to spend that time in September building the relationships, getting to know them, and knowing what each individual needs.
You hit the floor running.
Yeah, you
That's
kind
what
of
you
can.
do.
Yes, but there are lots of changes in those 2 years too. So we had a lot of discussion over the zeros and late work. And we do have a document. It is a typed document that has been shared with parents. It is on our updated AMS website. I know it's on our Tumble Down website and it's on the Sugarloaf website. Whether each parent has read that clearly enough, I'm not sure. I tend to find that things don't always get best communicated through the student home. And we are working, I did send a copy of this. I do email my parents weekly, and I know you do that as well. We also put it on Facebook. We have a team Facebook page. We've tried to get the document out to all parents. I don't think every parent has had a chance to read it, and it's easier to talk with a parent on a soccer field or at the grocery store. I'm a mother. I was guilty of that too. So,
I think one of your questions was the 0 to, it used to be that 0 to 60 was an F. So it's a 60-point grade span for one grade.
Right.
And then we weighted D's as less than that and C's as less than that. And F's were so huge. So a child could get half of it right and still earn an F, just like a child who did 10% of it would earn an F. And when you have a lot of zeros averaged in, it really brought down someone's grade. So we were trying to condense the grading by making it 50 to 100, so that 75 is an F now, and everything up from there is D, C, B, and A. I find it's actually harder now to get a B or an A than it used to be. And it's easier for a child to recover if they've had a 0. Now, I do put zeros in when they're missing an assignment.
because we're allowed to at the middle school. Part of our policy states missing assignments are allocated a score of 0 within the grading program until the work is turned in.
Right.
We're also allowed to take off up to 10%, but that's at the discretion of a teacher. Obviously, if a kid's out absent or has gone, had a funeral or something, we're not going to deduct them that 10%, but we want them to know that there are penalties and that they have to meet deadlines. That's really important to a lot of us.
It's something that they don't understand, because in elementary school, if they didn't do their homework, they might be in at recess, but it didn't count against them. And I do a lot of education with my 7th graders about making mistakes and how it's actually very good for your brain to make mistakes.
Learn that way.
Yep. You build a synapse immediately when you make a mistake, even though you don't realize it. And I said to them the other day when I handed back papers, I actually feel badly that I have to give you a grade on this. But if you made a mistake, now you have a chance to fix it and get full credit. And everyone fixes it because everyone wants full credit. You know, they like that A, they feel proud of that A, but they're learning at the same time. So
But they
having,
don't get multiple chances, like,
Right.
it's within a reasonable
Right,
deadline.
period
Like,
of
you
time.
don't, you can't go back in June and say, oh, can I redo that main map I did for you that I got a poor grade in trimester 1?
Yeah.
No, when trimester 1 is over, that will be,
Because you're preparing them for the real world, because they can't
Correct.
have too many upstarts
but they still need
again
a
and
safety
again.
net because they just came from elementary land. They're still little kids.
Yeah, and that's why it's so special. The middle school arena is so special,
Right.
because you understand that.
you don't
Because-
want to break them down. You
Right,
don't,
no.
I have the hardest time grading writing because I don't want any child to feel badly about what they've written because it's missing a period. If I had to take points off for everything in writing, I think I would crush them.
Yeah.
So I try to be very generous. But I find that with the grading system that we have right now, instead of grading them on whether they're proficient on a target, I'm starting to compare them against each other.
Wonderful.
You know what I mean?
Wonderful.
Which part of me doesn't
Yeah.
really like, you know, what's the difference between a 19 and an 18 on a writing assignment? Well,
yeah.
that one was a little bit better. You know, grading to me has always been a sticky situation. I really liked the proficiency-based system, but I make it a point to now emphasize when you make a mistake, really go
Yeah.
out and fix it, and they do now more than they did in the past.
They need the models. They need to know where to achieve.
So the nice thing about Power School is that we're able to go in and give them the traditional grade, and then at mid-trimester, we will be giving them a grade for the standards that we've matched up. Every assignment, whether it's formative, which is your smaller assignments, or your summative, which are your bigger, like your projects and your tests, they should be aligned to one of our targets. I mean, there's a purpose for us doing things, and there's a place for you. You just click a little button, and it's really easy to do. And in midterm, we'll be able to look at their formatives or their summatives and come up with the overall grade for their target. So they're, yes, and kind of grading them twice, but I really don't feel as if we're.
It doesn't give you a whole lot of extra work to do when you do that.
No.
Well,
No,
I know
I
it'll
don't feel
take you
it.
more work, but
Right, I don't feel that it does. The problem with Empower is that you had to click so many buttons to get to so many windows.
Yeah.
Power School, it was Empower. It really wasn't the
Right.
proficiency based, it was Empower that was clunky. I just kind of feel like I have to like put that out there. That's what I hear from a lot of the teachers. The Power School, they're more relieved with it. It's user friendly. There's gonna be some glitches. We're reinstating it, but I think for the most part, it's been smooth. We also looked at our habits of work rubric, and we included that in our grading. We did not include that in our final grade. The high school will tell you they've included it in their final grade, but we believe they're middle schoolers.
you're teaching it.
We're
Yeah.
teaching them how to be a
That's what you're
good
doing.
student with habits of work, so we didn't want that to bring down their grade.
Exactly.
But it's a separate grade, and it will still be there. So we preferred to tease those two out. We grade them in 4 areas for preparation, their pacing, productivity, and
Participation.
Thank you. I just had a tooth pulled. I'm having a hard time talking. Precipitation. And see, I did it again. I'm so sorry.
Participation, yes.
Thank you.
It's a big word.
Well, no, I just had a tooth pulled.
Yeah,
I know, that's
literally.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
So the
So pacing, participation, and the other 2 Ps?
Productivity, pacing, preparation, and participation.
and we can share this document can easily be shared
So,
with you.
so I mark in my grade book if a child has handed in something late.
Right, and Power School makes it easy to do that as well.
Right.
There's little icons, exclamation point for if it's missing. So my kids can, I don't have to go in and put a 0 in if it's missing right away. I go in and put that exclamation point, and they're like, oh, wait a second, I passed that in. And then they found out, oh, I didn't write my name on that. So then they pass it in. So it's really a great way to communicate with the kids.
So now you're in the 8th grade, you've looped over.
Yeah.
And so are you not using Empower now? Are you beginning to
I
use?
use Empower for the targets. The kids don't see Empower.
Okay, just for
I
the-
use it for my planning purposes and for curriculum purposes.
Right.
And it's very helpful. I have a lot of information that I've put into Empower as well. I have lessons in there. Everything is aligned with the standards.
Power School will tell you what the target is, but it won't tell you the foundational knowledge behind that target.
Right.
But Empower will break it down for you. So especially for new teachers, it's very important that they know what they need to teach first before they jump to that target.
So there's baseline vocabulary, let's say before you do the Constitution, that you need to do, and then once they've reached that 2.0 knowledge, they can go to the next level.
So, there's a lot of discussion on that this past spring. Should we have kept Power School? Empower, excuse me, Empower.
Do have Empower.
But that, you're using it, should we have not picked up Power School?
No, you're not hearing me. Okay, Empower is great for middle school,
Right.
for planning purposes.
Right.
For reporting purposes, Power School
Okay.
is much more useful and user-friendly for the parents and the teachers. Does that make more sense? We need both
We didn't like the way the platform worked.
for grading in Empower.
Right. Yep.
Empower has many different things that it can do.
We
But
do like the proficiency-based. That told me more than a number, and then a 19 out of 20 will tell me. Yeah.
And so we still have that ability. We're still giving that grade, and we're still looking at where kids fall. And with each target, there are rubrics for new teachers and old teachers to look to see, okay, are my kids, if they're not hitting this, have I gone over the pieces that they need? So it's helpful for teacher planning and preparation, and but very helpful, I think, in the idea that we're 6 separate teams, and we want to make sure kids have some common experiences at the middle school. So when they go, I'll go to a different civics class next year, they have the same background.
I have to confess that when I started teaching humanities years ago, and I
Yeah.
took over Sue's classroom, and I said, so what do we teach in 8th grade? Because she had taught 7th grade. She said, well, we teach these 2 novels. And we had Maine learning results, but it was so vague that I just fell back to what did I learn in 8th grade? And then when we started getting the standards, I was so relieved to finally have something to base my teaching on. Because as a science teacher, I had seen teachers make oobleck 4 different times during a kid's career, you know, whether or not they had to or not, because it was a fun activity. And now everything that we teach is based on a standard that's important for them to learn. And there are some standards that even I don't like to teach, some grammar standards that I would cringe, but they're there and I have to.
Right, just make sure that all kids have hit economics, have hit geography. And I'm starting to see that kids are having more common experiences using Empower, because before they were coming from 6 different elementary schools, and each kid had different, if one teacher might have done Greek mythology, but this other teacher spent a lot of time in the American Revolution. So this is evening out the time and the kids' experiences, and I'm hoping they're gonna start seeing that at the high school as well.
So do you think that as what you just mentioned, are we missing any components in terms of what used to be taught that we feel is important? Do you have any time, or is there any time for you to teach something relevant to what you have a passion about, that you feel that students need to learn? Well, for me, it would be teaching them typing very early and teaching them penmanship and getting it, I mean, that's simple, but that doesn't take long to teach. Get that going so they know how to, sign their name, and they can read cursive, because some of the kids are not able to read cursive anymore today. So there are some little things. Do you have time to teach that, or is this like all-consuming?
Oh, no. I mean, everybody has room in their schedules here and there.
That's what I like to hear.
Exploratories, they're teaching cursive on Team Bradbury, and on our team, we have a STEM block that everyone goes through, and a humanities block, and a guidance block. So we do things that are interesting as well, that, aren't linked to a target, but I'm not necessarily grading those experiences
Right,
either.
that's okay.
Right.
That's all right.
It doesn't have to be graded.
Well, what happened about teaching cursive from the industrial age, from the old time, in 3rd grade? We don't do that anymore in 3rd grade? We wait until we get to the important stuff in 8th grade, 7th grade to do
No, they're
it?
teaching penmanship.
They are teaching, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
I taught my kindergartners.
Even my 6th graders, my last years in the classroom, every week they were practicing cursive so they could sign a check
buy a house. Those were the
It's
goals.
relaxing to do that. I mean, it's kind of like, therapy.
And typing, actually, I think has kind of gone away. It's
But
keyboarding
again,
now.
it's like any of those things, just like my sixth graders that would tell me they hadn't learned something even though they had before. Even if they're learning the cursive, if they're not writing in the cursive because they're texting on their phone, they lose that practice too. So kudos to middle school for bringing it back.
Okay, so high school.
Hello, my name is Evan Sear. I teach at the high school, obviously. I teach in the science department, and I've been at Edward Little, I think this is year 12, and before that I taught down at Morse High School in Bath. So, I'm trying to remember some of the things we were asked to discuss, so I'm gonna start with the grading piece. We also have a document at the high school. As was noted, we have some different components in our grade. The document is a school-wide document. This is a little different for us. At the high school, traditionally, we've been used to, for lack of a better term, being kings of our own castles in terms of deciding what weights to assign in a traditional grade. So we now assign 60% of a student's grade to summative assessment, 25 to formative assessment, and 15% to the student responsibility piece. I do not think is giving our students more leeway. In fact, our upperclassmen, I'm finding, are having quite a hard time transitioning to sort of the reality check that got dropped on them with this new policy, specifically because students are only allowed to, in our policy, reassess a summative assessment once. Their new grade is now becomes an average of the two, so the better of the two or the higher of the two is not substituted in for their grade as an average of the two scores. And it's written such that if a student were to score worse, it's still the average. It makes no sort of delineation between whether a student does better the second time around or not. There is no mechanism specifically in the policy for reassessment of formative assessment, so that's sort of gone to the department levels. So departments are tending to do things similarly. And with regard to late work, a student that hands something in 6 days or more after the due date can earn no higher than a 70 now. So, no, we have definitely not made it easier for our students. In that task force meeting, basically what we heard was that the community wanted the high school level to really reflect, if not a high stakes sort of situation, a situation in which mistakes lead to serious consequences. One way that we sort of built in a safety net, though, is that we're no longer using quarters, we're grading over an entire semester. So this allows a student who makes some mistakes or some poor choices at the beginning of the semester to sort of pull it around and bring their averages up by doing well through the middle and latter parts of the semester. That's sort of that in a nutshell. Is there a question specific to that before I speak to something else?
So what we've done is that we've made our experience at the high school rigorous.
Correct.
More rigorous.
With regard to our expectation of when work is completed, yes.
And are you using, let me get this straight now, when the 8th graders come to the 9th grade, do they bring their Empower information to you? It ends with the 8th grade. You don't see that part of it at all.
We are not using
I know,
Empower.
you're using Power.
Power School Pro.
Right, right.
Right.
Excuse me.
I can access Empower if I choose, but I don't think that we've identified it as an institutional strategy We tend.
Use it as a tool.
Yeah, so I'm unique at the table in that I teach freshmen, is one of the grades that I teach, and I'm on one of the freshman teams. And so what we looked at specifically were the STAR reading scores. And the reason we looked at that is because at the high school level, literacy is really sort of the gateway to accessing a lot of the content. So even though I teach science, it's incredibly important that a student be able to read, be able to write, and in fact, they're going to be asked to do things a little bit differently because they won't be looking at literature per se, they'll be looking at technical reading and writing assignments. So also the other piece is that at the high school, our content, at least within the science department, and that's the one that I can speak to with the most confidence, is not necessarily a progression through an individual strand of or topic. It is more of a survey of several different topics, such that a student going into their sophomore year and taking biology will utilize skills that they've learned in physical science, but the content itself will be different enough that it's not building on the previous year's understanding.
Okay. Evan, without putting you on the spot, although I am putting you on the spot.
You've already done it, so go ahead.
How are the students reacting to this, especially the strictness of the late policy? And do you think that, have you thought of any ways to improve, or do you think it needs to be improved?
Our freshmen don't know any better, and quite honestly, they've been wonderful. They asked, can we redo these things? I said no, and they said okay. Honestly, I'd love to give you a salacious story, but that's the way it worked out with those guys. The upperclassmen are a little bit different, so my juniors and seniors are not pushing back so much as they are, quite honestly, and to be frank, they're a little upset that we changed the rules of the game on them, so to speak. But my juniors and seniors are adapting. They know that when we say this is how it's going to be, and when they go to every single teacher and it's that way across the building, that's the way it's going to be. And so it's been a transition for them, but it's not something I think that needs to be corrected per se. It's just been a learning curve for those guys, and they're catching on.
Okay, so you're saying, what I'm hearing is that a byproduct of this is consistency among your content areas and among your teachers?
Yes.
That's excellent. Good.
Nate, do you want to?
So you had asked a question earlier about, well, a couple of things. Evan answered the wiggle room question. I think we agree for every inch we gave them, we maybe took back 1.5. And so I think, the conversations that I have with my juniors are certainly 76 is the new 70. And so we've raised the floor a little bit. For better or for worse, that's what it is. A lot of that conversation is, am I gonna, and you need to get your credit, and grade needs to be above 76, and they're aware of that. To your question about how can we maybe fix some of that disconnect between performance in school and grading, I still think some of the problems that we see, I think, at the high school run a little deeper than just changing the rules of the game. We've got a demographic of kids that traditional academic settings aren't going to work for them, and I think we see a few more of those kids every year. I think in some cases we need to think of new programming, which would probably be rethinking staff allocation or hiring new staff even, but I think we probably need some type of new programming. I can think of a conversation that I've had again and again with one of my colleagues about how, some of these kids, the classroom just doesn't suit them. If you take them out in the world, you get a totally different point of view of the kid, but the classroom just doesn't suit them. And in some ways, we haven't added that programming. We have Franklin, but Franklin can only handle so much, and sometimes that's not the appropriate setting for some of our kids. So,
I think LRTC.
Yeah, we have LRTC too, but we still have, there are still kids, I can think of kids that I had on my roster last year who didn't go to LRTC, who wouldn't make the grade at Franklin, and for whom my classroom wasn't the most effective thing. And so I think thinking of different programming, schools within schools sort of models, I think would probably be appropriate for some of those kids, because, and I just think that's the way, if we're going to impact that. A lot of those state assessments are around reasoning skills. A lot of those state assessments are around critical thinking skills. We can do that, but for some kids, we can only do it in certain contexts. And those contexts have to be different than the classroom. They have to be out in the world, experiencing, seeing, touching, that sort of thing. Another thing I would suggest is that I really think we need to commit more of our energy and attention on instruction. We've tried to, on instruction, on teaching. We've attempted to make a lot of structural changes across the district, in the high school, but we've yet to really touch teaching. We've indirectly tried to impact it with assessments. With creation of assessments, with standards and things like that. But the way a kid meets a standard, and I'm thinking of our social studies standards, but it's true across all our standards, the way a kid meets a standard is if they can reason with certain units or increments of knowledge at deep levels. And part of that requires teaching those kids how to think in those ways. We haven't really touched that work yet. I think it's coming, but we haven't really touched that work. We've done a lot of things, I think, from the outside in. But teaching's the hardest thing to change.
And to teach them to think analytically needs to start at this level here and then proceed up, so that when they get to your level in social studies or history, they can take the Constitution apart and understand it.
Yes and no. I think the high school has something to contribute to the conversation. It's not developmentally appropriate for kindergarten kids to be doing some of that deeper thinking. They can do some of it, but yeah, no, I know. But we can stretch that out across. Right. But we haven't really touched that yet, and I think that's a challenge, because in some regard there's a bit of a disconnect between what we're assessing kids on and how we're instructing them. And so that gap can be challenging for kids sometimes. And I'm not saying it happens across the board, but I think there's a gap there. And I think teachers are starting to see that in some of their assessments.
Yeah, the assessment.
The statement that there's a gap between what we're teaching and the assessment.
Right.
Those aren't our state assessments. Those are the state assessments?
I think there's a gap there too. The state assessments are, I know, I can speak for social studies. I know there's a huge commitment to try to make social studies more about, any state assessment that's going to come out for social studies, there isn't one now, but any state assessment that's going to come out for social studies is going to be about rigorous thinking. It's going to be about, how do I read a primary source? It's going to be, how do I put together the past? How do I figure out what happened? And if we're just teaching them what happened, kids are never going to be able to figure out on their own how to put together the past. They don't have a method, they don't have the tool for it. And so I think, as these assessments evolve with education, I think we're going to have to fill in some of that skills gap. That's just the way it's going to be. But I think we've probably crafted really good assessments across departments. I speak for my department. I know our assessments are solid, but I also know that sometimes teachers are encountering, in some cases they're still teaching, they're telling the story instead of showing the kids how to put it together sometimes, because we don't always have the tools. And what we're really assessing them on a lot of times is, can they put together the story? And so those are two different things. One is telling, one is showing. And those are two very different things. It's a subtle difference, but it's very different.
Models of teaching,
right.
The way to teach history is to tell the stories of history. And that's how students learn. That's how they remember. They don't remember dates. They will remember the dates if you link it to the story of history, for example.
Well, even telling the story isn't what we should be doing anymore. In a lot of cases, you tell the story if it suits you, but there's got to be a part of the story that the kids put together and figure out on their own. They have to do history, right. Just like they have to. I think our standards are about doing. I think I don't speak for Evan, but I think his standards are about doing science, and that action to turn your subject matter into a verb is very different than traditional methods where the teacher had the knowledge. And so there's a lot of subtlety in where to pull back. How do I construct this learning so that it happens in an organic way? How do I make sure it's supported? What am I going to do if they don't figure it out? Those are all questions that follow that. And so in some cases, instituting the structural changes that we've made haven't made sense because we haven't always changed the teaching to go along with it.
Ideally, you are all the practitioners, the teachers. You have hard work to do, and you're in the middle of change, and you're helping your students navigate the journey of change. And as you go through this, I look to you to let us know what is working, what's not working, especially for the students who have difficulties, they have a different learning style. It's not my expectation that we need to send them somewhere else. I'm not saying that, when you made the reference, I'm just saying it's not my expectation to send them anyplace else. They need to learn in their way. Teachers need to understand how to teach them. If it may be a little differently than what's going on with our current curriculum, then do it. And I think that we need to give you permission to teach those students in the way that they learn best. We don't teach them the way they cannot learn. We teach to their strengths, and we don't teach to their weaknesses. So we know already as they go along. They don't come to middle school. They don't come to high school already knowing how to read and write. They don't. And you take them the way they come to you. The parents are giving you the best kids they've got. And you take them and you bring them to where they need to be. And I totally understand that, with my experience. And so my expectation would be that you will help us understand how to best meet the kids' needs who are both ends of the spectrum, the kids who are excelling and need to keep excelling, and the kids who need more direct instruction. And I've been harping on that. People know that a long time. I really think they need more differentiated instruction and more direct instruction. If they need it, give it to them. And so I look to all of you as the practitioners that will help us make all of this work for all kids at all levels.
And I think that many kids are at a severe disadvantage. Auburn has one of the highest mobility rates and one of the highest free and reduced hot lunch rates, and that takes us a whole other way in education that we need to deal with. We need to work with this place, the Lewiston, or any other schools that are sending our kids. We need to have more.
But if you teach them, they will learn. We know that.
Thank you.
I think we do need something, though, to help in the transition between elementary and middle and high school.
Yes.
There have been kids I've invested a lot of time in the middle school to get them to be successful, and then I find out later that they dropped out of high school. And that kills me.
Yeah,
that happened
kills me to hear it.
And I'm sure it's happened to you too. We get kids from the elementary schools that are not ready, and we pass kids on to the high school that are definitely not ready as well.
Time is against them because they need you. But you know what? I also know that if you make that connection and they make the connection, the light bulb goes off on the top of their heads, they can gain time in a rapid speed depending on how the situation is around them. I had a kid who came to me, and he was a non-reader. He was a non-writer, brilliant. I could tell he was brilliant. And because of how we teaching to their interests, things that motivate them, he made up 3 years' time in 1 year. Now, he's my shining star, but I'm not saying all kids will do that. But it's just, I just want to know that you'd be able to do this with children using what we're using right now, and being able to best meet the needs of kids who need that different twist.
Well, I think one of the things that will help us is if we have some stability in what we have access to. I know that we didn't really get a chance to play all the way with Empower. I mean, when you have just a year with something, you really don't know something. And we're going back to Power School Pro, which is something that we do know, but there's new stuff in that as well. We need time to figure it out, and I really thank you for the time of early release, because that has allowed us to have some time for that conversations with other teachers. At least I know we can find some of that time valuable. it's, the time is the biggest factor, and it's also something that we can't change, and also the number and the amount of kids that we have, you know, at the middle school level. That as well is, you know, when you have, like I said, 20 to 24 in a class, it's a little different, and we only have them in high school and middle school. We only get them for small periods and pockets of time. And so we're competing for their interest with their science and, you know, science and social studies and math. And so when they hit middle school, they're having all the subjects. So it is an adjustment. So we need to do a better job of moving them from one level to the other. I think we do a pretty good job with what we have and the resources that we're using. We need to continue focusing our work on Marzano and the higher order thinking skills, as Evan was explaining. I just really want to reiterate that I really like being able to use Empower for planning purposes. I think that has given us some of that continuity that we've been seeking and wanting, and it's allowed me to know what's going on at the high school and what's going on at the elementary level. We don't always have the time to speak at the different levels.
So tell us how Empower helps you know what's going on at the high
Because
school.
I know what targets they're going to hit at the high school. It's very clear to me what targets are going to be, and I know what targets that they're going to be hitting before 6th grade. So it makes our planning and our purposes in planning and letting the kids know this is why you need to know this. It makes things more transparent for the students. So while we don't use it for grading anymore, Empower is still an important tool, a resource that we have.
We're probably not finished yet, but I really appreciate, hearing from the mouth of teachers what's going on. We hear a lot in the community. We hear an awful lot of positive and negative and everything mixed in together. But I appreciate very much your coming forward and being able to speak clearly and speaking honestly with us, and thank you.
So you all are fairly young teachers as compared to, okay? So would you all like to go back to the traditional way of teaching?
They don't know what that means.
Yes, they do.
No, they
I've been
don't.
teaching for over 25 years. I've never done it the same you have to adjust to your students. If you're a good teacher,
All right, so the social studies teacher at the high school, you're social, right? History? So Nate, do you want to take and go back and, as I remembered history, it was listening to my instructor and asking questions and engaging and writing notes, you're right, Ms. Seguchi, and writing notes like crazy. And then we had a test and we regurgitated it all back to you. Would you like us to go back to that type of a teaching?
I mean,
Or
that's
are you
the way
too-
I was taught.
Okay, thank you.
And part of what, I mean, as a professional, I try to teach the opposite of how I taught and learned. It would be very easy for me to turn my class into that, and at times, you know, we get off on a tangent and it's 45 minutes later, and, you know, I've told this long story about something, and there goes the class period. So it'd be very easy for me to slip into that, but it's not fun. Like when I find myself talking too much, I'm not having that good of a time. I mean, you know, Kiara will tell you it happens in AP psychology because AP courses are more geared towards traditional measures. It's like sprinting a marathon, I tell them, and so there's some stuff we have to race through, and that's the most efficient way for me to explain it. But she'll also find out this year that wherever I can break away from that, I will. Wherever I can stop and do a demonstration or show an example, I will, because like I said, I mean, I can tell these kids everything I know, but that doesn't really mean they're going to learn it. I mean, I have to show them things, and they're sharp. That, you know, they can see things just like we see things. They can observe things just like we can observe things. Thinking, to me, I define learning as thinking, and so if they're not thinking, I'm not really doing much. I always tell my kids I want them to leave with more questions than they came in with, because a good question, you know, you can make a career out of a good question. And so when they leave with questions, I feel I've done my job. When they leave confused sometimes, not all the time, depending on the type of confusion, but when they leave confused, like really chewing on something, you know, I've done my job. I ask the questions I don't know the answers to, and I, for fun, kick it to them and say, you try this on. So, I mean, I could never go back. I've never been wired that way, and my training's not that way. You know, but I just don't think we get the most out of history that way. We've had to make sacrifices as a result. You can't tell the whole story if you're going to dive deep. And so we've had to cut parts of the story out in some of our classes, because we just don't, if we're going to take a deep dive, then we can't take a mile-wide, inch-deep approach. We've got to say we're going to chop here so we can jump in really deep here. Those are the sacrifices that we make, you know, for better or for worse.
And in the high school level, we've heard that the professional development on Wednesday afternoons that we have said is good.
Well, we've only had one.
I know, big deal, right?
But I'm foreseeing it to be very useful for the purposes of us discussing the curriculum.
And do you guys see that is going to be beneficial for you?
I mean, we had one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. I wasn't there. From what I heard, people want to know what's coming next. That's kind of the question that hangs over that. I think if it goes in a direction that's useful, great. If it becomes something that's not useful, then people will get frustrated very quickly. But I don't think there's anything unusual about that type of initiative.
I will add, though, at the very least, one positive thing that has come out of it is that we will get to meet together more often. One thing you will find at the high school level is that we rarely leave our departments. And I mean physically rarely get to leave our departments. So it can be refreshing to be able to connect with our colleagues in other departments. And I can say that our first Wednesday was focused on discussing professional learning communities, but it was really more of a time to reconnect or to make new connections with our colleagues in the building, which I think is helpful, useful, and quite honestly, I think it's very powerful. It allows us to be able to think outside of our departments as well as get physically outside of our departments, so that I can start thinking about what are the things I'm doing in my class that Nate is also doing. So it sort of gives us the time to talk and think about how we can use each other to strengthen each other's content. So.
On the high school level, do you folks use current events in the classroom with your students
I mean,
that are relevant to the subjects you speak?
Yeah, I mean, we try to take, in the social studies department, we try to take the approach of selecting the parts of history that most inform present day.
Would you use this Kavanaugh thing at all?
I'm sure in our civics class that they're probably, why wouldn't you? I mean, politics, yeah, I mean, politics today, it's easy to be a social studies teacher today. I mean, all we have to do is, I mean, it's really easy. You know, the news writes our curriculum for us. So, I mean,
and in science?
In fact, sort of current events are one of the easiest ways to help our students connect with the material. By the time we get to the high school, we're often talking about higher order scientific content, and our science standards are not, they're not as thematic as you might find in social studies. They're actually quite discrete, so that instead of a standard specific to understanding a scientific principle, you might find a standard that says students understand what a black hole is and what the evidence is that scientists use to study black holes. So this is like a fairly specific sort of discrete piece of knowledge, and that is not engaging, quite honestly. So the easiest way to help students to engage with that is to use a current or as current an event that we can around that subject so that students can sort of at least connect it to themselves in terms of the time that we are in, and sort of saying, okay, this is something that we are talking about now in the scientific community, and this is something that someone just discovered or discovered recently, or new knowledge or new events that have recently happened.
Like today, for a handicapped fossil like me, I read that General Motors and Honda are collaborating, and within 2 years they might have a self-driving car without even any controls for a driver. That to me is just amazing.
Bob, let me know when you buy one, because that's a nightmare.
What?
Let me know when you buy one, because that could be a nightmare.
Drive anymore.
But to follow up on, to follow up on Mr.
And I won't
Manili's,
have to beg for rides. And with,
Don't mind.
then the school bus, that'll be a solution for the school bus driver shortage.
oh, there you go, there you go, good job. To follow up on Mr. Manili's question, at the elementary school, what do you do with current events? And
I mean, current events to second graders is
Oh, you're in second
their
grade.
lives. Everything is a current
Right,
event.
right.
You know, when they were little, 6 months prior,
Right.
that's how they refer to things. But we use Scholastic News. We do
Okay, good.
YouTube appropriate videos for to tie into what our targets are. We do hands-on experiments tied to our targets, but tied to the community. We've had students from the EL come to our school to design lessons that related to when we had a motion unit. The physics class came to our second grade, and they created experiments for our second graders to perform, which is key because the second graders are seeing themselves as scientists. And I feel that one of the biggest parts of my role as an early elementary teacher is to show them the possibilities and show all of them that they're all capable of learning and loving education, so that when they get further down the table, hopefully they still have a little bit of that in them. Yep. And so, you know, tied to the targets and everything, I think that also helps them because they don't just see themselves as a number score. They see them as, this is where I am today, and when I keep working at it, I'm going to get there at some point.
Good, thank you.
Pat?
I don't know if we're going to talk about this in other workshops, but she mentioned the word YouTube, so my question is, how can you quantify the time that you use anything, electronic equipment in instruction in your rooms? I mean, we've been hearing conflicting numbers, and I really would like to get an honest response if I can.
Are you asking how much we like put technology into our lessons?
Yes.
So like in my class, I rarely would I, gone are the days where you come into the classroom and you have, remember when you used to have the film strip and you hear the little beep and you turn the little beep, okay, and then you went to the teacher rolling in the cart with the VCR. Well, now all of our kids have one-to-one devices, at least 7 through 12, and so a lot of times we might give them a quick video to settle them in class. For instance, I will show them something. I have to approve something on YouTube before they can watch it in my class, so I have to pre-watch everything. But there's also things like TeacherTube that are a lot more helpful. We also use things like Vocabulary. It's a weekly current event summary of what's going on in the news, and she's nodding her head, she's used them before. So, and we have Dogo News, which I can level to a reader, and there's Newsella, is that how you say it?
And I use Google Docs
Yeah,
with the kids. I use Google Classroom. They learn how to compose on Google Docs, how to send and receive email, all kinds of skills that they can use in the real world.
But it doesn't take and preempt you from teaching.
Oh, absolutely not.
You're not
If
using
there's
this
no
as-
Wi-Fi in the building, it's horrendous. No, we want our technology. It's very important.
But it doesn't replace us as the
No.
teacher.
No.
They wouldn't know how to do it. I mean, there's a lot of prep work that goes into getting them to use the technology appropriately. You know, we have part of our good teaching is having standard operating procedures. And as you'll see, as you walk through classrooms at AMS, we all have technology guidelines that we use and follow through. And I mean,
Tomorrow, Bonnie, you're coming to my room, and they're analyzing a video. And they have to make sense of it and figure out who's the audience that this is for, and what's the subject, and what's the context in which it was made. So they're reading a story, but it happens to be a video this time. They're 7th graders, so slowly, eventually they'll be reading a couple pages of nonfiction and analyzing that, but right now, they might be reading a video, and it might take one lesson, and then we move on. But
so, yeah, like I started class with a segment from Bill Green's Maine, and it was about growing, we no longer grow blueberries as much, in trying to hit the target of our economy and Maine's economy. And so we started out with that, blueberry farming, and how that's now turned into some other cauliflower and broccoli, which I had no idea about. But we, yes. And so then from that, I sprang off the lesson from that. So we don't necessarily like say, okay, go here and this will teach you how to do it. No. That's not how it works.
No.
At the elementary model,
Yeah.
our teachers use the workshop model in instruction. So we use that for our math instruction and our literacy instruction. That means our teachers provide a whole class mini lesson, and then students often break into rotation work. So teachers might use technology. At the elementary pre-K, well, K through 6, we're 2-to-1 ratio. So they're shared devices. So teachers can use iPads as like a center station for exploratory work, or in Google Classroom, or in Google Docs, or using Explain Everything. Colleen does phenomenal work with her kids with math problem solving. I got to go to one of their celebrations last year, which was wonderful. And they meet with the teacher and then rotate through. That's what the workshop model looks like. So in the elementary level, that it might be a piece of their day, but it's certainly not replacing that valuable work that they're doing with their teacher.
So did you not get your computers on time?
We did, yeah. We've
It
been
took us a while this year.
It was 8th graders already had them assigned to
Right.
them, so we didn't have, we had them right away. But I mean, we do some old-fashioned book work. They still need to know how to use the text before they get to the high school, and you have to, use a variety of materials.
I have to say, we were chomping at the bit, and it was only like 12 days of schools had gone by, and it felt like months.
But it was only like 12 or 16 days,
Right,
right?
it wasn't that much, but we were really aching for it. Yeah, we wanted it.
Mrs. Gucci, would you like to share the comment?
He's going to be embarrassed.
Want me to share?
No, I will. My Isaac's in the 7th grade, my grandson, and he was waiting for his laptop. So he finally got it. He got in the car, I picked him up, and I said, "Did you finally get your laptop?" And he said, "Yeah, I got it today." But Mimi, he says, "It doesn't work." I said, "Well, what's wrong with it?" And he said, "It only has school stuff on it."
Yeah, some of them are a little surprised
Yeah.
to find that it can't be used just to watch Netflix.
Right.
And do those things. So we, like I said, we do a lot of work surrounding SOPs and technology guidelines with them, and that takes September to do that, so. But 8th grade, you can hit the ground running.
Right, and I wasn't too worried about the 7th grade, because I knew you did a lot of team building and transition work and explanation of whether, and they wake up one day and they're in a different building, different structure, different everything, so.
Evan?
I'll answer your question briefly by first stating that what I'm doing in my classroom is indicative of what my colleagues in the science department are doing as well, although we're each working on things that are a little bit differently. So I can tell you, currently in my engineering course, we've taken a break from designing truss bridges using software developed by the West Point School of Engineering, and yes, like that West Point, okay? And so we took a break from that project because one of my colleagues in the social studies department decided that she would really love some 3D historical structures that the kids could look at. So for instance, a Mesopotamian ziggurat, or currently we're looking at the Great Wall of China. So my engineering students put the brakes on our actual engineering class and are learning how to use Google SketchUp. We're then going to take that, work in conjunction with the teacher across the hall, Eric Eisman, who has a 3D printer. So we'll be sending our digital sketches to Mr. Eisman, whose class will then be teaching my class how to reformat our designs so that the 3D printer can read them, print off the best of our designs of the Great Wall of China that we will then ship down the hall to Mrs. Heydrich's classroom. So, so as you can imagine, it's being used a lot in my engineering class. It was before we started this, but it's also been great because it allows us to drop what we're doing and have the tools to do some of these advanced design pieces. For my freshman science, they have a project coming up in which they will actually be making a short 3 to 5 minute documentary. Of course, this is going to require them to use their laptops. As we're learning about our topic, gone are the days of the textbook. Textbooks are not updated fast enough, quite frankly, for them to be useful anymore. So a lot of the primary sources that we are utilizing are coming directly from, for instance, right now, we were working on a NASA website today to learn about some of the other planets and their atmospheres and some of the most current research on that and why our atmosphere is habitable. And so we wouldn't be able to do that if we had to sort of rely on a decades-old textbook. So the computer is not in front of them all of the time, but it is an essential tool, particularly for primary research and also for development of final products. And as I said, that's fairly indicative of my colleagues in the science department, and I'll let Nate speak to what happens in the social studies department.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. I mean, most of the people in our department keep either a website or a Google Classroom just as a back channel, which helps facilitates things. We definitely have people that are doing sort of higher order stuff. We have, I know a few teachers that make heavy use of the mapping, GPS mapping stuff that's available to them. You know, we access videos too sometimes as a means of delivering content. Something's interesting, if it's visual, all these kids can access it, which makes it nice. So yeah, it's not, is it in front of them every single day? No, there's still some stuff best done on pen and paper or chalkboard or whatever. But is it an essential tool? Do we need to have it as an option? Certainly.
Our curriculum director has informed us over the last couple of years that we now have a delineated curriculum K-12. Are you aware of that? I thought you might. Has that been helpful? And the way I'm looking at this is, I've got 6 elementary schools coming to 1 middle school, and you alluded to this a little bit, that the students are coming to you more similarly prepared?
Now they are.
Yes.
And as we begin to implement the targets, the SOPs, all of those things that have some familiarity. So when they come to AMS, it's not so much of a shock to their system. Yeah, and it's easier for us to take them where they are, bring them where they need to be.
And how's that transition from middle school to high school being affected?
I mean, I think we find as we've started to do it more and more, and as more grades have come online with some of this stuff, I mean, I think we find wrinkles. The social studies curriculum needs some work. And I think, but
we've changed it quite a bit.
Right.
In the 25 years,
they're talking more.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so the 25 years, I went from, we had an old book with strands. Remember the strands? It was I don't know, long. Do you know what I'm talking? Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
So I'm talking way back in '95. Not trying to time myself here, but then we went to the Maine State learning results, and then from that we had our own assessment system, and with the Maine State learning result. I mean, it just seems that we've changed, and this seems to be the most concrete thing. I feel like with the Empower, again, having that, it's been really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think conceptually it's fine, but I think we find wrinkles. Like, I look at our standards sometime and I'm like, boy, I don't know if that's a real progression. It feels like they're put in a row in Empower, but that doesn't necessarily mean that one thing is building off the other sometimes with our social studies standards.
I think we had like a whole 2-hour discussion in the summertime about the progression of one of them, just not making sense.
Yeah, so I mean, you work through that, but sometimes you don't see it when you look at it as a theoretical thing, and then you hit the ground running in your classroom and you realize, 3 doesn't follow 2, doesn't follow 1, or it would work better in this sequence, or it would work better to combine. So conceptually, I don't think you'll find too many people who object to having concrete targets that are theoretically well sequenced. But on the ground, we, as content area teachers, or as, just as teachers, I think, we all have ideas about how things should be sequenced so that it's most effective for kids.
You alluded to the fact that the PLC, I think, is what they referred to, and that now you're having an opportunity to talk with other staff in the high school. I know it only happened recently, but is that something that needs to be fostered more at all levels? Are we doing it enough? Are we providing you with enough opportunity now? Would the challenges that elementary has, particularly with our demographics and the students coming to you with wholly different preparations, I mean, from 0 to 100, and you're having to deal with those across 6 elementary schools, and then preparing them for middle school, which then get in the high school, and then the influx and the mobility and things. The assistance that being able to talk to that previous teacher or the teacher across the hall, as you mentioned, I think can be invaluable in addressing the needs of, say, one particular student, but that applies to all your students. Are you finding that there's enough time in your day? Well, there's never enough time in your day.
Certainly.
We know that.
The number one request,
but
right?
we have tried to allocate some time to that within your day. Is the time that we have allocated and given to you as best we can
1 hour.
been successful? Do you need more? Some feedback for both us as a committee and the community would be helpful to understand how that time is valuable to you in bringing our students forward.
May I jump in?
Jump in.
I do not want to sound negative. My honest answer is no. We are not given enough time. As a freshman team teacher, I meet with my teammates much more often than I will ever meet in the PLCs. Meeting on a regular basis with my team teachers has been invaluable. This year we're meeting a little bit less than we were last year. Last year my team was meeting once a week, and that was great. The problem was that we were giving up our prep time to do so. So we sort of made the conscious decision to say we were getting a big enough bang for a buck that we were going to cut that time out of our own preparatory time. Having an early release Wednesday once a month is appreciated, but to frankly answer the question, is that enough time to really see the development that we are all hoping for in the room? My belief is no. We need to meet much more often, and I say that based on my experience on a freshman team.
At the middle school, we get to meet with our teams more than once a week, so that is really beneficial because kids are going through a lot, as I've said, in middle school, and we're able to discuss behavioral problems, academic problems, and come up with solutions and to some of the kids' problems, so that we meet with our teams more frequently than we do curriculum. I think it's the opposite at the high school. You have more time with your curriculum than you would, and they're not in teams. So we appreciate the early release time so that we can use that for curriculum, because we're busy doing our own schedules. I mean, there's a lot of work we do within each team. If you want to.
And just speaking for English, I believe, the senior English teacher on staff, and I've been teaching English for 6 years. So everybody has been there less than me. So working as a curriculum group together is very beneficial because some people are brand new teachers. We do have some people who came in from outside of the district, but they're still learning, our methods and our ways. We didn't meet very often last year because sometimes those very small meeting times were taken up. So I'm really hoping that these half days will allow us not only to meet as curricular groups, but meet with 6th grade teachers, meet with 9th grade teachers. I learned more about the high school from having my daughter go to the high school than I ever did from a meeting while working in this district. I now understand English at the high school a lot better, up until 10th grade. When she gets to 11th grade, I'll know that one a little better. But I gave up a prep period last week to run over to the high school for 25 minutes to sit in on a 9th grade regular English class so I could see what was expected at the beginning of the year, because I had sent my 8th graders over there and I wanted to see what they were experiencing, because I'm always thinking ahead. I want my kids to be prepared for what they're going to see. So I would love that opportunity to be able to talk to 6th grade and say, you know what, this is really great what this one group is doing with Greek mythology. I wish everybody used that content to teach these lessons that are in the standards so that all the children got that experience rather than just one school or 2 schools. So I want to have that conversation very badly.
And how do you workshop days?
How many workshop days?
How do your workshop days inform your ability to beef up on your skills and be able to do the work that you need to do to become more proficient, to be more prepared? What do your workshop days do for you?
Can I answer the first question?
Sure.
Which was about professional development, right, for Wednesdays? Is that the question that we were answering? So on our Wednesday afternoons, elementary has the benefit that we early release 2 hours every Wednesday, and then once a month that coordinates with our middle school and high school colleagues. And for our staff, we use that opportunity to dig into Marzano's framework to develop them professionally on best practices for our students. That includes curriculum, looking at this tomorrow, our staff on our early release professional time, Friday. Workshop. I'm thinking about our professional time, which we've been in today. But we might look at workshop framework. We might talk about Lucy Calkins, which is new curriculum for our staff to be using in literacy and writing instruction. So it gives real focused time to really have those conversations instead of worrying about teachers worrying about their kids, because they're always concerned about their kids and making contact with parents. It's time for them to really dig in deep and do that work collaboratively together. So that's the focus on our professional time. A lot of schools we're all doing PBIS to support our students for those needs that are outside of the academics, behaviorally, home life, making those connections, building up that sense of community within our schools too. So we're embracing that and doing a lot of work with that as well. Workshop days is driven by the needs of staff. So what we need professionally, what we need based on curriculum. This week for us at Fairview, on Friday, we shared our agenda with staff today. So on Friday, we'll be really working around our Tiger Pact that we built as a staff and building out what that looks like for our students and looking again at our workshop model and best practices, and staff will be pairing up and doing gallery walks together and talking about things that are happening. So we use that time for team conversations focused around instructional needs, on our student needs, things like that.
Thank you.
Very good.
Wait,
Do you have a comment? Yes, by all means.
I feel that the workshop days and the early release days are very beneficial to the elementary, because that's when we get our cross-grade conversations in, where we have our weekly PLCs that's grade level based, but we don't get as many opportunities to talk to as a second grade teacher, to talk to first grade teachers and third grade teachers. And all of our early release days are scheduled in that way, so we even sit in a cross-grade manner in staff meetings and breakout sessions. So they're very powerful.
Yes.
Very good.
Mr.
We've
Chair?
reached 7:30, and that's the end of the workshop. I appreciate your coming and enlightening us.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Invite you, Bonnie's bringing tomorrow, come in anytime.
We're going to take at least 5 minutes to get resettled.
Different.
Yeah, I mean, we.
call this meeting of the Auburn School Committee,
Just keep going, keep going.
yeah, with a pledge of allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And introductions. We'll start with you, Bob. Punch you down.
Bob Manili, Ward 1.
Faith Fontaine at large.
Bonnie Hayes, Ward 2.
Tom Kendall, Ward 3.
Katie Gronin, Superintendent.
Pat Gaudier at large.
Dan Poisson, Ward 5.
Alfreda Fornia, Ward 4, and representative to the mayor.
Michelle McClellan, Assistant Superintendent.
Adam Hansen, Business Manager.
Kiara Fournier, student rep.
And communications. Has anyone had communication? Do you have any? Yes, Pat.
At the last meeting, I believe Mrs. Tucker asked about the Share Center and being open to public participation. And I spoke with Lisa Rodriguez, the person in charge. She said that she remembers having it, well, they had it before, but now the way that they code their items and everything, they're not priced. But she does have a section called the Green Zone. And the Green Zone is a section that the public can shop in if they wish. It's a very small section, and hopefully if they can get some bigger quarters, it might be a little bit more in there. And the items are not specifically priced, but they are there. You can take them by making a donation. Okay?
And Lisa did say to feel free to get in touch with her at the Share Center if there was something specific that you could talk about, what you might access.
Any other Elfrida?
Is the communication from constituents, two things specifically. One having to do with a field hockey game being called off due to some transportation needs, and maybe we can talk about that later or something, but I would like to, and the constituents would like to know, you know, what's the problem and how can this be alleviated so that we're not missing any hockey games, because that impacts the other team from the other school. And the other one, kind of relative to that, would have to be the last ELHS football game had to be called off because too many players did not qualify. And I think we need to follow that up and talk about that as well. Was that correct?
No, it's not correct. I know the answer to that.
What's that? That's what I've heard from.
You're talking about the JV football.
The JV.
Yeah, JV football team. What happened is freshman football team. I'm guessing this is the one that I talked to Todd about. Yeah, so jump in. So transportation, drivers are needed. Every district is struggling. The athletic directors are talking. If you subscribe to the city communications, what's it called? I'm looking at you, Leroy. I'm asking for help here. The Auburn Connections, but Alfreda, what, I don't know. But you can sign up on the city to get city notifications. And so.
The alerts.
Yes, there we go, the alerts. So they pushed that out, looking for drivers for us. We put on a Facebook page again. We're putting out information to our staff to see if there are people who might be able to do trip only. We've reached out to for that. So the day that, and I don't know about field hockey. I'd not heard field hockey. Definitely boys soccer was the issue. So that day the boys soccer game could not go, Scott, Anir, myself, Billy Hunter, we were calling all over the area to, and I think I wrote this to all of you about this. So I had communicated with all of you, so I'll communicate with the public. And so I had called Lisbon, who was hoping to help us, and when he couldn't help us, he said, by the way, RSU4 just called me. We called SAD 16, we called Hudson, we called Northeast Charter, who told us we were the third school to call today. So we're all struggling with it.
Yes.
The football team, in order to play, they could have had they had a bus to go at 3:45, and they were going to play under the lights because Oxford has under the lights. But what happened is some of the players need to be practicing for the varsity game. So it didn't give them enough players to play because they swing. So there are players that are swinging, and the players that were swinging to varsity couldn't go to the game. So Todd talked to them, and I believe they played last night, or no, probably Monday. I saw on Twitter that on Monday they went to Oxford and made up the game. So when I talked to Todd, he said, we're not alone. We're all trying to work hard to adjust. People who have lights, as you saw in Lewiston yesterday, our game, they opened their turf field for us to go to the play our game there, and then Lewiston played under the lights after. So everybody's trying to work hard, and that's been a major discussion every day, right, Adam?
Yes, it has.
It has. So,
Every day.
so we're trying really hard to.
Right. I know a lot of districts are advertising all over the
Exactly.
place, so I just was wondering what our
As
plan,
you know, SAD 52
what
is
our plan
advertising
was.
in Auburn.
He will. He will. Katie,
Yes.
a while ago, we had an assistant principal that was able to drive a bus.
Mm-hmm.
Is he still got his license?
I'm not sure who that was.
Mr. Galway?
Oh, we can reach out to Mr. Galway.
Not at
Yeah.
all the time, but
Right.
he might be able to drive.
Yeah.
What about Mr. Anir? He doesn't have his?
No. he does
What's
not.
the matter?
But the other thing we've talked about is, as we prepare for the next season, working with teams around parents being able to drive the van. We have vans, but there's certain things, so Todd and I did discuss that, because I spoke to a parent about that. We can do that, we just have to get the insurance, fingerprinting, background, all that, and then we'll have to talk about it. Some teams, like in the winter last year, ski team you could do that with, but a bigger team you can't do that with. But Faith, were you going to ask me about that?
Oh, yeah, I had a parent ask. I mean,
About
I have a
vans.
minivan.
Yeah.
Why couldn't parents? But again, it's a liability, and
Yes, correct.
so that's the reason why parents can't transport in a situation like this.
Right, we would have to get everything
Signed off
and so forth. But absolutely, it's something we should be looking at. So we've talked about
Katie, I know somebody that would have taken an occasional trip
it. Okay.
for sports.
Good.
What are the criteria on the bus? You have to have what license? Which license?
I have it written in my email, I could look it up.
You have it in your email? I know you have to have specific endorsements, so even if you have your
A P and an S,
P and an S endorsement, even if
Yeah.
you have your CDL, you have to have a P and an S.
yeah.
And how do you get a P and an S? Okay.
I
Well,
can't
you-
tell you
you-
the specific steps.
Okay, all right.
Billy could.
You go to the Department of Motor Vehicle and
Okay.
you say you're looking for a bus transportation license. They will give a permit. You probably have to test for the permit, but you get a permit, and then you can call our transportation and say you're interested in driving, and we will train so that you get your hours on the road. Once you get the hours that you need, it's similar to driving a car. Once you get the hours, then you go through a test, and then when you pass the test, you can drive. It's about a 4-month process. So we're trying to find, thinking outside the box, veterans, people who might have had a license to drive a truck, for example. So what does it take them to get the bus license? So we're trying to reach out to everyone we're thinking of in regards to doing that. Same exact process, so. Okay. They would have to do the hours on the bus and everything, okay. So we're trying to see what we can do because you don't need to necessarily drive full-time for us, but if you had your license and you wanted to pick up extra hours, you could do trips for us. So if people want to do trips, field trips or sports or weekend trips, we're also taking names for that
Yeah.
as well.
Anyone who can drive will be very flexible. We'll make it work.
As long as your record is good,
Of course.
yes.
Anyone with the proper qualifications.
Yeah.
Idea.
Yeah, they have been notified as well. Yes. We've notified them. Laura? Correct. Yes. Yeah, they know that, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know they're having problems at
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the problem with the coach, well, like a team like, well, like I asked about soccer, they would have needed 8 vans to go, 6 to 8 vans. So you have to have 6 parents, 8 ready to go with their insurance, their license. I have to have, so, but yes.
You have to have 8 vans.
But we've talked about that as well, to get them all up to speed. Okay, so thank you for asking that, because that has been a lot of talk
Wanna
around our grant.
Keep winning our games.
Yeah, I know.
Is that CDL and the 2 endorsements also in the little buses, the short ones?
Yes.
Same for all the buses?
I believe so, yes. Well, maybe not.
If I
the one-
remember from researching it a couple of years ago, if it's 15 passenger or more, you have to have the CDL. And there are certain endorsements. I couldn't say for sure if it's the PNS, but there are
Believe me,
requirements around that.
We were ready to go in vans, we didn't have enough people. I mean,
Did you have enough vans?
we probably had enough close, we were close.
All right, any other
Nope.
communication?
That's it.
Very good. Consent agenda for this evening is the approval of this agenda and the approval of our minutes for our September 19th meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any further questions? All those in favor? There we go. Public participation. Anyone have in the public have a comment that is not on the agenda this evening? Please come forward. Share with us your comments.
Laura Garcia, 20 Skillings Corner Road. The workshop that took place tonight was a direct result of the parents requesting back in March for an opportunity to be heard on the issues surrounding mass customized learning and proficiency-based learning. At that time, we were told it was the law. Pressure continued, a task force was formed, the law changed. Again, the request was made for stakeholders to have an opportunity to be heard on these issues. And then the workshops were talked about. The workshops are of very little value if all stakeholders do not have an opportunity. You are alienating parents who have students in the schools, who have questions, comments, observations, who are hearing from their kids' teachers, who are hearing from their students about these changes. Why is the school board so afraid to let teachers and parents talk about these issues? Why can't us parents ask some questions? The teachers have all left. I have a few questions for them. I have studied this stuff. I have talked endlessly to people in other districts, teachers, students in our own district. And I really don't understand, if you really want the community to come together and to support these changes, then why do the parents not have a seat at the table? Why, when I was on the task force and participated in this, do I not get an opportunity to ask some questions of the people who were asked to be here tonight? I know I've got teachers who've asked me to ask some questions of the teachers who are here tonight. And I know I've talked to a few teachers that didn't even know the workshops were going on. This concerns me. I do have a few questions, however, for the school board on some of the information I heard during the workshop. Or how have the teachers been instructed to explain the 50 to 100% scale to the students? Anybody know?
We'll get back to you on that. If you please list your questions. It'd be fine.
Okay. I'd like to know what a playlist is on Empower and how it's used. Actually, I know the answer to that question because Sue Callahan showed me during the task force. And tonight she talked about it was a way for her to organize her curriculum. But I also know under the framework of mass customized learning, the idea is that you create playlists. This is how you accommodate students moving at different paces because the teacher puts the curriculum on the computer. And so when they're at a certain level, they simply have to tap on the playlist, and then they work through the various things on the computer that make up those essential elements to satisfy the target. So it's not just a tool being used by a teacher to organize their thoughts or outline their instruction. I'd like to know from the school board, do the test scores that our students have had in recent years, I'm willing to go back just say 5 years because we've been at this since 2010, have they shown improvement? Are we on the right track? Can you show that proficiency has improved? That's the true measure in my mind. There was talk about the fact that we're striving for consistency. At first, that sounds like a reasonable goal. We want the message to be consistent at the high school. So we weight the grades. Everybody gets one policy. The concern I have about that, and you heard a little bit about it here, is different content areas are different. They're taught different. Science, you have labs. They're hands-on. I can assure you that civics is going to be a lot more involved in current events and debates than math. So while there is some value to consistency, I think we have to also recognize that there is value to allowing the teachers some latitude within their content areas. Because certain things, like participation, might be of more value for the learning process in civics than it is in math. This is something I'd like us to talk about, not just assume. I think we get caught up in thinking technology is progress. We get caught up in thinking consistency is a good thing, but it can be a bad thing too. And the only way we know that and we're allowed to bat it around is to consider the flip side and see. I also heard tonight about the question of whether or not somebody gets credit. High school teacher said the students have learned that they have to have a 76 to get credit. Actually, the way your policy is written, they have to be proficient. That they can actually have a 76 but be considered not proficient and thereby not get credit. Which brings us to one of the reasons for these workshops is there was the state mandate for proficiency-based learning. It no longer exists. Traditionally, there was the credit system. If a student passed, they got credit. They needed a certain number of credits to graduate. The proficiency-based system is different. The proficiency-based system says that in the 8 content areas, students must satisfy all the targets. Now I ask the school board members, do you know how many targets there are, let's say, for 7th and 8th grade English language arts? Anybody? I'd like you to find out. I know how many there are. Do you know how many writing targets there are for 6th grade? How about the scales? I know. Teachers have been sending them to me. And the concern I've been hearing from teachers is about the amount of time they're having to do to input the data, particularly at the elementary level. Our focus has largely been on the middle school and the high school, but I think we need to make sure that we're talking to our elementary school teachers about that as well, because they feel like they have a classroom of kids with a lot of different types of needs, behavioral, emotional, academic, and they're not having the time to figure out innovative ways on their own to connect with these kids because they're being dictated to about the targets. So I think that's something we need to really be considering. The task force met. They agreed to the 0 to 100 grading scale, and then there was the grading committees. I did an FOAA request. I was bothered by, I requested all the documents related to that, thinking I'd get minutes about what they talked about and all of this. I got very, very limited documents. And what I will tell you is that basically, despite the task force recommendation, which was based on surveys in which teachers said they did not want dual grading, and the people wanted to return to the 0 to 100. But the way it was rolled out to the grading committees was that it was to be a 50 to 100 grading scale, and that was non-negotiable. I also learned that the grading committees were assigned a reading assignment from a book on standards, grading, and about how the traditional system is flawed. And what I'm wondering is, why didn't we take that up? Because I actually photocopied a chapter from that book and brought it to the task force so that we could discuss some of these issues. But we didn't discuss it at the task force. So why did we spend all that time on the task force only to have our recommendation completely changed and then the grading committee to be treated similarly to the task force in terms of let's vet the traditional grading system versus the 1 through 4 grading? So I'm really not sure what to do about that. And unfortunately, I won't be able to participate in the task force anymore because I am coaching soccer at AMS, and there is a conflict. I very much liked what the gentleman who teaches civics had to say about education. I personally do not feel it is about the stream of targets, because I do think that kids have different strengths and different weaknesses, different experiences. I feel it is more about teaching students that they can do whatever they want to do because they have the ability to think for themselves and to be critical thinkers, problem solvers. And so while they may not like math, maybe they'll be the next president of the United States. But they have to gain that confidence. And the person that gives them that confidence in their ability to learn is a teacher and the relationships that a teacher forms. You kept talking about traditional learning, Ms. Hayes.
I asked one question.
What?
I asked a question about traditional learning.
You talked, okay. You talked about traditional learning and how it compares. And I was confused by that because I don't think the type of learning that you described or teaching has been used for a long time. And I really don't think the teaching kids about current events or doing projects. I know even when I was teaching at Andover College on the paralegal studies program, I remember teaching them about false advertising and having them go home and find 5 products at home that made promises about certain things and to look closely at the language and bring in the toothpaste that says it will whiten your teeth. And does it really promise that, or look closely at how it is? I don't really think these are new things. I think these are the things that good teachers do. And my concern at this point is we are burdening some of our best teachers with tasks that don't really make their teaching better. But it will cause them to leave and resign. And the number of teachers that have left the district in the last 8 years has doubled. Our retention rate is not good. And I would like to know from the school board whether we do exit interviews of teachers so that we have a better understanding of why they are leaving the district. I have more questions, Chairman Kendall, but I will reduce them to writing to ensure that I get answers.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I declare public participation closed.
She's got another one.
Oh, yes, come right up, sorry.
Barbara Hawanik, 134 Nottingham Road. I am frustrated by a couple aspects of the meeting tonight. I don't understand why the public cannot participate in something that the public asked for. It seems more of like almost a show put on to show what's being done, as opposed to parents and students being able to be here to ask questions about the process, about what's happening in our schools. It didn't seem all that productive as an observer. It's also concerning to me that there didn't seem to be any notice that went out about this meeting. How can we have a public forum if the public isn't informed about it? I think that's a real huge ball that is dropped, and it's been a problem through this process. My other issue that is stuck in my mind tonight is Mrs. Carson talking about having 7th graders who read at a 3rd grade level. That isn't something a 7th grade teacher should have to cope with. That child should never have gotten out of the 3rd grade if they can't read at a 3rd grade level. They shouldn't go to 4th grade. This is showing us more flaws in our system. Maybe it's the need for smaller classrooms. Maybe it's the need for more interventionists. I don't know what the answer is, but that is not the first case of a child in the middle school not being able to read beyond the 3rd grade level, and how the heck are they going to make it to high school if they can't read? And it's happening in math, it's happening in all of the subjects. So in theory, maybe proficiency-based learning is supposed to catch these kids, but it doesn't seem to be catching them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Very good. Do we have student information that you'd like to share this evening?
Sure.
Great.
Yes. Okay, so I guess to start with the Leadership Council, I'll just say some of the
Bring your mic just a little bit closer. There you go.
I'll just say some of the stuff that we plan to do or in the process of doing. So Friday for the football game, we're trying to do an alumni tent. I don't know if you guys have heard that, but we want as many EL alumni as we can, and I believe the plan is to have them make a, I don't know what to call it, but a little pathway for the football players to run out to the field. Yeah. And I think there's going to be something for them to sign so that we can keep track of who is there. I missed the first half of my meeting today because my car got stuck in mud, so they were kind of talking about that. Then we also have, or we're trying to do a get a TV monitor set up at EL so that we can highlight like sports events or like Spirit Week or just certain things that we want people to see around the school, so that in between classes that we'll play and you can like look up and see some of the stuff. I believe in the, we have an entertainment committee, and in that committee we have people trying to work on a study night that I think would be in between sports so that there wouldn't be practices that conflicted with it. And there'd be like a coffee house stuff and set up and with people to help with homework and stuff. I believe that's one of the ideas. And yeah, that's what we're doing for the most part in the Leadership Council. Oh, sorry.
Great.
And also, as you know, it's Spirit Week this week, so that's what we've been doing. And then tomorrow we're going to be performing our skits and then the floats and all that, have the big pep rally. The theme is decades, so seniors are in first, I believe, at the moment.
Very good.
And then also tomorrow's Thursday. So on Friday, the field hockey team is having a breast cancer awareness game at Sherwood, and it's gonna be our motto, I guess, is "Stick it to cancer." And we have shirts and we're selling baked goods. We're gonna have a shoot on the goalie. People are gonna pay money to shoot on our goalie Elise and Emma and Emily. And I believe there'll be like prizes that we can win. I talked to Mr. Sampson about getting like an athletic pass for a student and adult that they could possibly like win or get raffled off. And then, yeah, so we're raising money for breast cancer. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Good. Thank you. A lot going on. Good thing to have it that way. Superintendent's report, planning and development. I think we have an update on our fall enrollment.
Right, so this is the annual check-in on enrollment, October 1. Okay, that way. Hopefully I put enough out. Last time I didn't count well.
I can send more that way if you haven't got it.
Send more this way. Some can go out.
See that packet.
So the October 1, it used to be with your subsidy, they would take October 1 and April 1 and do an average. Like,
Both the same?
oh, no, that's, did I give you? Oh, that's for later. Well, this is the one you're looking for.
Yeah, so these are extras then.
Yeah, those are
Just
extra.
pass the extras for the
Yeah.
community.
Okay. But now it's based on your October 1 count only. They don't collect April 1. And so you can see that we're down 15 students this October 1. You have to remember, in a community that's mobile, kids are moving in and out. So there'll be movement, but they have to be enrolled with us as of October 1. So as they move around, other districts pick up the student, we pick up students, so we're ever moving. But overall, we're up 61 since 2011, so that's a good thing. As you can see, for 2018, we're still higher than 16, 15, 14. So you can see we're still above where we have been. And we know we're going to see up and down. Last year we had a healthy increase from 16, 17, and then 17, 18 we're at minus 15 students. This is not certified yet, so that's still being worked on. So next year you'll see it as certified, and you'll hear about it on our budget meetings, what was used for our calculations. You'll see when I do Edward Little's numbers, I take Franklin's. Franklin is about, I think I counted 68 students around. See how I remember these things? I don't, yeah. 68 students at Franklin, and as you know, this is the month, though, that he is working with the other schools, working with Lewiston about placement. So for Edward Little, I took his 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th graders and put them in here. So Edward Little, combined with Franklin, is up 8 students from last year, so they're maintaining. The Auburn Middle School, they were up 32 students. Now, you have to remember, it's really hard to do enrollment because there are pockets, right? You're going to have classes where there are a lot of students, like their freshman last year was a huge class. So that class moves up to the high school, and then the 6th grade class moves into the middle school. So it depends how large the class is as it's going up. If you start to look at the elementary, you'll see that their enrollment is slightly down. We knew that kindergarten was going to be down because our pre-K numbers were not as high last year. Last year, we were very concerned about our pre-K numbers, so we kind of knew kindergarten was going to be a little lower. This year's pre-K is very healthy. We have every pre-K full except for the afternoon at Park Avenue, which is at 7, and they should have 15, and there are wait lists at the other schools. So we do ask parents, are they willing to transport to Park, and if they choose that. What's interesting about Park Avenue is they started, I got the call from Chris C. Lenahan, who oversees our pre-K program, very worried that Park Avenue may not be able to hold 2 sessions. So the good news is they were able to fill their morning session and half fill their afternoon, when at first they didn't think they could fill the morning. So people come out and they start to realize, oh, I can enroll. I think all of us in the community, whenever I see a student that a child that looks around for, no, are you signed up for pre-K? So we try, and so I anticipate our kindergarten numbers will be higher next year because our pre-K numbers are higher. Okay, so some of that you kind of can predict. So you'll see East Auburn, they're at 181. Then you turn the page and you have Fairview that had a slight increase from last year of 4. Park Avenue had a decrease. Sherwood Heights had a decrease as well. And most of that, as you'll see when I give out the class sizes, where some of that hit was, and primary had less students. Walton had a slight decrease, and Washburn had a decrease. But you can see overall where we are with where the different schools. So to piggyback on that, to show you the class sizes in relation to enrollment, there's only 4 of you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember this year in the budget, you added a teacher to Sherwood Heights, you added a teacher to Fairview, and you added a teacher to Park Avenue. That brought their numbers, you know, enrollment, as those parents spoke around class sizes, you know, we're doing our best around class sizes. Could we do better? Yeah, we could. You know, I would say that, you know, East Auburn struggles with class sizes. And I think, Dan, you kind of spoke to me before the meeting, if you don't mind me saying something, but it's hard when you have 6 elementary schools that you range from a small to large. If you had a larger elementary school, you would have more options. The East Auburn doesn't have room. So I could say, Sue, I'm going to add 3 teachers to you, and she'd say, and where would you like to put them? You know, so then we would have to have trailers. You know, there are other costs when you're going to lower class sizes at East Auburn. And if that's something you want to consider, we can talk at budget time about what it would cost to add portables, what it would cost. So that's a struggle at East Auburn. Sue knows that. She works very hard with her staff to make sure that they do have a strong learning environment. So I always appreciate how hard her staff works, knowing their resources. Sherwood Heights, there you can notice right off, their kindergarten numbers are down. They went from 60 to 36. Now, she could have moved that teacher around, but we talk about nice to have class sizes at 12, 13, 14 at the primary. You have to honor that. In those days when we were always reducing teachers, I even have a mind frame, well, we could take that teacher and move it. It's going to raise class sizes, but it would save us money. So if we're in a different mindset that we want to honor what we have to change our focal point. Our focal point has been to be more fiscally, you know, oh, well, can we afford it? Can we afford it? Well, there comes a price on that. So Sherwood Heights, you can see, went down in kindergarten, but her 3, 4, 5, 6 has stayed pretty healthy. So you can see a shift there. Fairview, we added a teacher there, which really helped the 6th grade. The 5th grade is still there. They're doing multis to help support that. They're doing multis at the 1-2. So you can see where her numbers have gone down. Notice that wherever it says FY18 was last year's number up against this year's number. So you can see that Fairview's down in the first grade and slightly down in 3rd grade. And then you can see where they're up in 4th grade and then significantly down in 6th grade. But they had a bubble. They had a large 6th grade in there, so they've moved staff around. The Walton is staying very well. They have a nice class sizes. Their 4th grade is at 26. So they have to debate, do I bring down the 4th grade to raise the 3rd grade, or do I keep the 3rd grade low? Just as that parent said, we want kids reading on a 3rd grade level. Well, so that's what they've decided. We need to lower the numbers in primary, raise the numbers in the intermediate. I mean, it's all where do we feel our resources can best support our students. Park Avenue, we're watching very closely their 5th grade. So you put an extra teacher in, that reduced their 6th grade numbers because that was their high bubble, but they have a 5th grade issue. So Lila has been working with her teachers. During instructional time, they're averaging around 19. So it's 28, yes, when they go to music and art and PE, they're ranging there. But during instructional time, working with their staff, they're reducing that with the support of their ELL staff and their special ed staff to make it manageable. Is it ideal? No. When I said to Lila, if I went to school committee and asked for teacher, where would you put the teacher? Again, they don't have room. Right now, when they added the 6th grade teacher, they bumped a special ed classroom into a very small space. They put a 6th grade into a special ed space that wasn't built for a classroom, where they can't put more than 18 students in. So I said to her, you would have to move a class down into the basement area where the art and music room, the only space you have is you would have to put music in a cart and put a classroom down there. Well, that's not ideal to segregate one class down into the basement area. So, you know, adding teachers, we don't always have the space that's conducive. So she and I talked a lot about, you know, if you feel at some need a point of an ed tech to support. You know, so we've been discussing that, and she's watching it, and right now she feels like they're managing. But as we look next year at 6th grade, she'll have an additional teacher there because she will have lost the high 6th grade, so she can put that teacher possibly in the 5th grade. That will next year be 6th grade. Trying to make this clear. I know it's a lot to take in. Washburn, they are doing well with a lot of multis, as you can see. They still have 23 in their 4th grade. This is the school with high needs. Their kids benefit from small class sizes, so we like to see them. Might even like to see them lower in that primary grade. But right now they're at 17, 18, averaging 19 overall. So that's the picture of the elementary. You can see which grades are up, which grades are down, and it's year to year, and the principals with their teachers work hard on where to best put the resources and their people.
Any questions?
And as we go to budget, we'll have to talk about, where might that be the needs for next year as they look at their classes next year.
This is not totally inconsistent with the population study that we did for the high school, which suggests our population should stay fairly stable, at least not declining to any great degree. So it may bounce around a little bit around these numbers. Yes, Bonnie?
Tell me what I'm missing.
You missed
Fairview.
Yeah.
2018 enrollment subsidy. 569.
You don't have pre-K. Pre-K is missing from class sizes.
In the class sizes?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the totals, do not compare the totals on class sizes to the total on your subsidy count, because I didn't put pre-K in there, number one. Number two, there's EDD is not in, so programs that have students in self-contained are not in there. And subsidy counts some other things, so they're not apples to apples.
Well, I just took Fairview. They're all a little different than what they were. So what you're saying is that pre-K isn't in any of them.
Right.
They're pre-K are not in any of the numbers.
And pre-K also is part of a subsidy, right?
Yes. Yeah. We get subsidy for pre-K. I have to double check whether the subsidy has pre-K in it. Probably not. So ignore what I just said. I think pre-K is a separate number.
No, it's included now.
It's included in what we get for funds, but the paper I look for the October 1 count, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, but for subsidy, it is included
In the subsidy number, I'm thinking because of the numbers being so close that they are not included in the number I take off our October 1 count. They go in as a count because we get a separate line for pre-K students. But why they're different is, one, because they pulled out self-contained out of their numbers, and if they are out-of-district students, so they're placed in a Spurwink or stuff, they wouldn't be counted in the classes, but they would be counted in the subsidy. Okay. So there are lots of different reasons, but it's not because pre-K is not in there in the subsidy. I stand corrected on that.
So on the class sizes, can we have pre-K included in the...
Your pre-K, I can tell you that pre-K doesn't go beyond 15, so East Auburn has 2 sessions of pre-K, and they're both it has 1 session of pre-K at 16. Sherwood Heights has both are full at 16 with a wait list. Fairview, you have 4 sessions of your pre-K, and are they all full right now? You're close, I believe. Yeah. So Walton, you're full with 2 sessions. Park Avenue, I told you, is full in the morning and 7 in the afternoon. And Washburn, you're full on 2 sessions. So Washburn has 2 sessions, Park has 2 sessions, Walton has 2 sessions, Fairview has 4 sessions, Sherwood has 2 sessions, and East Auburn has 1 session.
Katie, is it possible that you could do an addendum and send us another piece of paper that outlines what we have in pre-K so that we are...
Sure. Yeah, I can add
that
pre-K
would
in.
complete the
I don't
picture.
put it in because it throws off the average with the teachers, so, but I will definitely.
No, just to show what each,
I can
so that
definitely
we
do.
have that knowledge of
Yeah.
I
how
agree with
many
it.
we have
I
in
will
each
add
school.
pre-K.
Right, and it's not only good for the size of the classes for teachers, but I'm also concerned about Park Avenue, that we have the building size, or in the
Oh,
basement
yeah.
or wherever, because I think we need to look at student enrollment for building sizes.
Right.
Remember, we have two rooms that can be
Added on, yeah.
at pre-K.
Yeah, I mean, at Park Avenue, yeah, and that's definitely something else we can talk about. Okay, I'll add the pre-K and I'll resend it to you, okay?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
I had a question.
yeah.
Do we expect any influx of kids with the 2 housing projects that are going up?
Good question, Dan. Because that's a little bit of my fear, to be honest, because it will definitely impact Fairview. We haven't heard yet. Spring Street will impact Sherwood Heights. And then somebody told me one in the Washburn area. Who told me that? Was Alfreda? Troy Street.
Troy Street will have multi-bedroom units. As far as Spring Street, as far as I know, that they're just single bedrooms.
So Spring
I
might
doubt
come-
that there would be a lot of children
Okay.
from that.
All right, no,
But
thank you.
perhaps some from the Troy Street.
So I think Troy
And there's
Street
another
is
one on
Wal-
Minot Avenue that's
is
going up.
Walton. So Troy Street could affect Walton, and the Minot Avenue could affect Fairview. So we're going to have to watch those for sure.
Well, the only thing with Fairview and Minot Avenue is that they have tarred the street. They have paved Minot Avenue. So the rule of thumb is that you can't disturb the paving for 5 years. So we may get a little reprieve there.
Well, there you go.
That's only for purposes of putting in gas
Well, no, gas and sewer.
and sewer. yeah.
And they already ran the lines, though? Looks like they already ran the lines.
I don't think so, Dan. Are they running lines?
I think they already ran the lines.
Today, they were in front of the school.
Okay.
Okay. So
Good point, Dan.
we're watching, we know that is coming in. We'll have to watch the numbers on that, definitely.
And actually, it would be nice if we took and had a communication with the planning department to see what's on their board schedule of what may be coming down, so we can give our input that we're full.
Well, they do ask, and how much that stops the project or not is not, you know. They did ask me about mine, and I said I was very concerned about Fairview School. We're already at capacity, and they were telling me that it was a workforce development, that they didn't think there would be a lot of families.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of multi-bedroom
But Dan said there's
units.
3-bedroom units, so,
There are some.
you know.
There are some, but they did limit.
Very
the number.
limited.
Yeah, they limit, I would say they limited the number. So that's what I was told, they had limited it, so we won't know until.
That's right.
But it would be nice, Katie, if we had a communication with them, so that if Michelle McClellan decides that she's going to put up a workforce development on Court Street, it would be nice to know, what are you guys thinking over here?
Yeah.
Are you going to, you know?
They do
before-
include us on planning board agendas.
But sometimes it's too late.
It's too late. No, I agree. I will
That
work
would
with
be
them on that.
something you should talk about
I will.
with the manager. When you have your meetings with him, that's a question to ask him.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and then actually, I'm sure they'd be happy to come and present, or he could draw
That's
up
a good
a
idea,
report
too.
for you, either one. It'd be good to,
Maybe an update from the city planner around
that's not a,
projects.
that's not a
That's a good
problem at
idea.
all.
Okay.
So ask.
I will definitely ask. That's a good one. Yep. Okay.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, we're moving on to the transfer of funds. Every year, we have to balance our budget.
Yep,
get
so Adam
things
will
in
explain
line.
that,
So,
and
Adam, what do we have
administrators, we certainly thank you for being here and supporting.
Oh, they're all going to leave.
Well, they've had a long day, they've got another long day tomorrow, so.
You guys can leave too.
Yeah.
They
We won't
wanna
talk
hear
about you, we
this.
promise. You've come this far. Okay, Adam.
So as we've mentioned the last couple meetings, and as the Finance Committee is aware, every year we have to transfer funds between articles if individual articles exceeded budget. It has nothing to do with the overall budget exceeding the budget. That did not happen, but we did have 3 individual articles that exceeded budget. And those were special education, system administration, and transportation and buses. The special education is one we've been talking about all year due to higher than expected out-of-district tuition costs, so we're looking for a transfer of $495,000 there. System administration, we're looking for $90,000. That was due to staff turnover, benefit changes, and also retirement of staff. Transportation and buses, we're looking for $45,000, and this cost center went over because we did purchase the 2 additional buses that were approved by the state with full reimbursement through state subsidy. We can transfer up to 5% out of any one cost center, so we need to transfer $270,000 from facilities maintenance and $360,000 from regular instruction. And by making those moves, it will balance all of the cost centers.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
Just 2 questions, thank you. Special education, I continue to make my statement that we continue to see higher and higher bills every year. This is $500,000, $495,000. I am very concerned that we really don't have a plan going. I'm sorry that our special ed director left, because I was going to ask him what he has in mind for, bringing
He's coming on
programs.
December 5th with the workshop. I've communicated
December 5th.
everything December 5th.
Yes,
Well,
a
you
few
have-
months away, but.
But you have workshops.
Yeah, right. So could he address that?
Oh, his workshop is December 5th, and
Right.
I've already shared with him what
Right.
you've said at
Right.
meetings. So even though he's not here, I communicate with him.
Right.
He'll be here on December 5th with his ideas.
With some ideas
Yep,
of what the plans
definitely.
are. Because this continues, it will not stop unless we do something to bring the programs here. It's understandable that, all of the programs that we send these students to are going to continue to, their cost is going to rise and rise and rise, and we're going to incur those costs. So I just think we need a plan, and we need to start moving in it.
And before we have a plan,
Yes. Yes, Bonnie?
Before we have a plan, I would like to see if we're going to institute a program for whatever it is, I want to see the cost of the program, including benefits to the staff and the salary of the staff, and where we're going to put it. Okay? And I think we need to compare both of them.
Well, I've explained this. You have to invest to save, so
I get it.
you're
I
right.
get it.
You're going to lower your special ed, but you're going to raise, you still have to pay for the service for the students.
Right.
Over the long run, you're going to save. And Ryan Fairchild has talked about bringing a program in for students with autism, so that is what he's working on. But there are some programs that they're better suited, they're better trained, they have a better understanding of certain students. So I would not recommend bringing all the students back in. What I would recommend is looking at populations and that we can address, and that's what Ryan's going to bring forward. Because there's certain programs we can't mirror. One, we can't afford it, but yes.
And when I say...
return on investment is what we've talked about.
And when I say staff, I don't just mean teachers.
Oh, no, right.
I mean the behavioral
BCBAs
person,
and,
all of the psychologists and everything.
Exactly, yes. He knows that, yeah. You're right, because you're going to have to,
Well, we just need to start that discussion.
Exactly.
We need to get someplace,
Right.
First step, baby steps, and just move towards whatever we can. And the other one, 90,000 needed due to staff turnover and retirement. If someone is retiring, is that 90,000 because they have certain incentives that we need to pay them when they retire? Is that what it is?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's not an incentive to retire.
Yes,
not-
good point, Bonnie.
Sometimes it is.
Not an incentive to
No, we
retire.
didn't give an incentive.
But,
Right.
yes,
Not an
a
incentive.
payout of
Their retirement package or
something
benefits?
earned that they receive upon retirement.
Yep,
That's
okay.
a good clarification.
Yes,
Yeah, we
not an
didn't give
incentive to retire.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. We had a motion and a second. No further discussion. All those,
One other
yes,
thing.
go
The
Bonnie.
buses, sorry, the buses.
Yes, Bonnie.
We have 4 in the budget currently. Are these 2 more?
Adam loves his buses. Go ahead, Adam.
Katie really wants to hear me talk about buses again. She loves it.
He just loves his new bus.
So these 2 buses were purchased last year after being approved by the state. We then put 4 buses in the budget. These are in addition to the 2.
That's what I wanted to
And we received the 4 new buses this week.
We did.
So I keep mentioning it, and Katie's
we don't
like,
have a driver.
"That's enough." Well,
I
we
said,
know.
boy, you love these
It's exciting.
buses. Then what did I say to you today? Do you want to get your license? And you said,
Yeah.
I'd be afraid that I might have an accident.
You don't want me driving the bus.
We'll save mileage on them.
Yeah, he's like,
I'll stay in my lane.
well, they'll move the new buses into routes. I know.
I didn't want you to drive the bus. I have heard, yes.
No idea.
But as Katie pointed out, my 5-year-old would be very excited if I got involved in a bus, because that's his thing right now.
I've already signed Noah up for driving a bus when he's old enough.
And he will be our future transportation director, no doubt.
Oh, we talked about me getting a license. Trust me, that
He
came
did.
up.
All right, I move.
Don't
Can
watch
we
me drive
vote
my
now?
car.
I'm trying to get there, Bob, but I keep getting
I move.
interrupted. I tell you,
I move
I
it.
don't
And
know what it
Bob's
is.
got- okay.
All those in favor? All right, we have a balanced budget, but no increase to our budget, because that's not allowed. We just transferred funds. We need to elect a delegate to the MSBA Annual Delegate Assembly. I believe the only 2 that have expressed interest in attending are Bonnie and myself. Is anyone else? Faith, did I see your hand go up?
No, I
mean,
haven't.
saw your
Going to
hand.
Las Vegas?
We are.
Yeah, Las Vegas, that's right. No, it's Augusta.
If you only can go one day, just let me know, because I can sign you up for one day. Bonnie's done that
That
before.
date again?
So it's October 25th, 26th?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. October 25th, 26th. Bonnie and Tom are signed up. If you also want to be signed up, or you want to come for one day, just let me know. Right. So
If you can come for one day, I would suggest come Thursday, where everything
The
is
first day.
fresh.
Thursday has
It's
a
fresh,
lot.
and there's good seminars,
Yep.
and it's a good experience, and if you haven't been, you really need to go.
Yeah.
It's fun. Dan?
It's very informative as well.
Close the garage, Dan.
Very informative.
Okay.
So we need to elect a delegate. Unfortunately, I will not be there
I volunteer.
Thursday afternoon, so Bonnie has volunteered. I need a motion, and the board has to approve that Bonnie serve as our delegate.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Very good.
Just so you know, I will be emailing you out the resolutions that you need to look at. There are a lot of resolutions, and, one is on proficiency-based education. So part of our next meeting is to inform Bonnie as to where you would like to have her vote. And there are some big topics on there. So I will send that ahead of the meeting so that you have time to read it and think about it. And if you have questions for me on what you're reading, this comes from the Maine State School Board, your Maine School Association. And so it's important that you know as a board what all the boards across the state are thinking. So I'll send that out to you.
They lobbied
I think you already got them, but I'll send them out again.
They lobbied the legislature and the
Yes, I did. Yep.
DOE to our benefit, so.
Yep.
What's going on? Information committee reports. City Council. Elfrida, we got things on the City Council that affect the schools.
Yeah, a couple real quick. The summer.
Real
there
quick,
was-
or Bob's going to.
That's right.
There was a summer block party that took place for the Make-A-Wish fundraiser. It was a Make-A-Wish fundraiser, and $75,000 was raised, and that's the most they've ever raised anywhere for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So that was, and you were at the meeting, Katie. Another report is Parks and Recreation Advisory Board we're having communications from 2 departments every single meeting, and it's been very informative. And Dana Staples, the chair of the Advisory Board for Parks and Recreation, did mention that he has tried to contact you. He'd like to be on the building committee so that there could be some talk with, the collaboration between city and school as far as facilities are
Right, and
concerned,
what was it-
recreation is concerned,
Right.
like the fields, in
Right.
particular the fields.
Yeah, and I already talked to Sabrina Best about that, and Scott Anir. Dana Staples did reach out to us, and he will be invited to the meeting in October for subcommittee. And Sabrina met with Todd Sampson. And Scott, were you at that meeting? I don't know if you, no, and Phil Kroll and Adam was
Phil
there.
and
Adam
Billy, yeah.
and Billy to talk about fields. So there
Cool.
was communication. I don't think Dana Staples was aware of that.
Okay, well, he'll be included, that's great.
Yeah, he'll be included.
That'll
Yep.
be super, thank
Yep.
you.
You're welcome.
You've heard a lot of talk about the Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee on Agriculture and Resource Protection. So there are 2 of us who are co-chairing, and that's Holly Lasagna and myself, and we're going to start work on that very, very soon. We will try to put to rest the 2 top issues, which is the 50% rule and the 10 acres rule. So we're going to tackle that first and then go beyond that. So there'll be more information about that later. And lastly, as a celebratory, and you were there, Katie, to see that Catherine Garcia, Laura Garcia's daughter, she's a 7th grader in Auburn Middle School. She participated in the Auburn Book Project, and this happens in 6th grade.
Right.
For all the grades. And so she won the 2018 award. She's very pleased with that. I wanted to also let everyone know that there are actually 9 finalists for this particular year. And these 9 finalists were Nicole Agosu, of course, Catherine Garcia, Braden Hibbard, excuse me, Micah Joler, Madeline Keep, Liam Kovacevic, I think it is. Kovacevic. It's not a French name. Kaylin Langlois, Alice Slover, and Annabeth Treadwell. What will happen is there will be a book signing by them. They'll be selling, Catherine will be selling her books for $5 each. It'll be taking place at the Auburn Public Library on October 13th from 11 a.m. to noon. So if anybody's interested in that. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Pat, you have 3 committees that you serve on. Have we got reports on any one of those?
No, the curriculum committee is not met, but the task force is meeting tomorrow at 4. The Share Center met last night, and I wasn't able to go, and I don't have the minutes yet. And the other one, I never.
All right. Transportation, Dan? Nothing? We did have...
Can I just say
Yeah,
something
fine.
about the transportation? I think that we need to review the policy for the transportation on it, especially for the pre-K kids.
It's on the list.
Yeah, we are.
You are?
They
Okay.
already
We are
are.
going to review the
Yeah.
policy.
Yep,
Okay,
they are.
thank you.
Welcome.
We did have an EL Building Committee meeting last week, which was really just a summary of where we are and setting out the timeline for the coming year, which starts to get fairly aggressive now that we have a site. The architects can go forward with concept design, study the site a little bit more closely, see how we can fit the fields and the facility on that site, how it would make the most sense to do so. So we will start up, the subcommittees did not meet. We will start those aggressively as well. Fundraising will pick up as soon as we have something, I'll call it, to fundraise for, which by that I mean something that you can actually look at, let's say, the design concept, say, for a performing arts center or something of that sort. So a lot will begin to happen from this point forward. It was a relatively short meeting, and we were just setting schedules so that everyone would get on the same page. And we thanked everyone for their participation so far, and we anticipate a lot more work in the year ahead.
Tom, can we get all the fields on the site?
we can get all fields on the site as we looked at it, with the exception right now of the tennis courts, although that may be possible with a little more creative use of slopes.
Okay, thank you.
No other committees have met, I don't believe. So we have our upcoming meetings, October 17th, and a workshop at 6.
And we were supposed to check in on, did you like the 6 to 7:30?
That work for everyone?
Okay, all right.
Okay, stay with that. No executive session this evening. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? We're out of here.